Hello there, my name is Patrick, and you have just entered the Gameverse. Today I'm going to be reviewing Assault Android Cactus, which although being on PC for a while now, just recently released for the PS4. Now this is the first review I've ever done, so I just really want to quickly explain how I'll be doing my reviews. The way I do reviews is I give an overview of what the game is all about, I then give my pros and cons, then following that I give my final thoughts, and finally a rating out of 5 stars. If you wish to skip to any of these parts in the review, there will be timestamps in the description below. Let's get started with the overview. It is described by the developer Witchbeam Games as an arcade-style twin-stick shooter set in a vivid sci-fi universe. Which is a pretty apt description, that's exactly what it is. You'll find yourself plopped into the middle of a room, surrounded by enemies who relentlessly come at you from all sides. There are a ton of different enemy types, ones that try to melee you, shoot you, buzz into you, blow up onto you, and on and on and on. The game features an interesting health mechanic where you have both a health bar and a battery bar. Unlike what you might expect, taking enough damage to empty your health bar does not kill you, but knocks you down. This forces you to press your fire button enough times to fill it back up again before being able to move and shoot. Your battery bar constantly depletes, and if it runs out, you game over. Now random enemies will drop battery packs, and picking them up will refill your battery by a large amount. So while having your health bar depleted doesn't kill you, you will find you die quite often because your battery is almost empty, and you take too much damage trying to make a break for the battery pack. Your character will run out of power, with the battery sitting just a couple inches in front of you. What a sad ending for such a noble android. While you play this game, you'll find yourself on extremely interesting and very different maps, many with their own unique mechanics. As you go further and further in the campaign, it gets more and more difficult, as expected, until you're just at a point where you're spamming all your abilities, rushing for batteries and power-ups, and dodging bullets like Neo from the Matrix. And let me just tell you, this game, it's hectic. It's quite difficult at times. It's mindless, and it's a ton of fun. Honestly, I was surprised by the end of it how much fun I was having. Now I'm gonna say this game can be pretty frustrating later on in the levels, especially with how liberal the developers get with one-hit instant knockdown abilities. But for a game like this, I think it makes total sense for it to be challenging. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had to improve to complete a level or defeat a boss. When I finally downed a boss or passed that level that I had spent so much time on, I felt really accomplished. Now this game is co-op, you can play with up to 3 friends, and while I never tried any of the co-op, I believe that this would elevate the game even higher in terms of fun and replayability. Let's talk about the modes available in the game for a moment. There are 4: Campaign, Infinity Drive, Daily Drive, and Boss Rush, each with their own global and friend leaderboards. In fact, the campaign has a leaderboard for each individual level. When you first boot up the game, you will only have Campaign, which is the main story mode. In the campaign, you follow the adventure of a junior constable named Cactus, who responds to a distress call and ends up stranded on a space freighter under attack by its own robot workers. You run into a group of friendly androids, and that's where the game begins. After a quick tutorial mission, you will find yourself on the overworld map, where you can freely walk around completing the different missions on your way to a boss. You can actually do these missions in any order, even fighting the boss first if you want, but you have to complete every level to power the teleporter. Once you're past the tutorial mission, you can choose to play as any of the androids in your group. After each boss fight, you pick up another android to join your cause. But who cares, because after the first boss fight, you get Starch, who is the best in oh so many ways. Seriously though, I pretty much only used another android when I needed footage for someone else. She's hilarious. She's awesome, and her laser rocket barrage combo is disgustingly good. Now, I'm sure someone who plays this game every day will tell me some random character I hated is actually the best, but they're wrong, because Starch is. The actual story of the campaign is close to non-existent. They're going to the core to shut down all the rogue robots, and that's pretty much it. You get a little bit of text dialogue with the bosses before and after each fight, but those tend to be more background on the android you're using in the fight than anything else. There's a bunch of voice acting at the start, but then all that cuts out and the rest of the game is text-based, which is a personal gripe of mine. I hate when games do this. I'd rather all voice or all text or an even mix, but not having all voice and then no voice and then some voice at the end, but Anyway, that's a personal gripe, so moving on. The daily drive, a mode you unlock later in the game, I'm not really sure when because I just beat the game in one sitting, and you only get a notification of everything you've unlocked after you exit to the main menu, but the daily drive is a daily challenge mode, which you can attempt once per day. If your battery runs out, that's it. There's no redos. You can play through it up to 4 times each day if you have people to play with. Because you can do 1, 2, 3, and 4 player versions. That's it, that's the whole game mode. It's a daily challenge mode and it's pretty simple, but it's something that could keep you coming back each day if you want to try and top the leaderboards. The Infinity Drive is a wave-based mode where you fight endless waves of enemies that get increasingly more difficult the longer you survive. I managed to make it to wave 13. In the 13 waves I played through, I fought the first boss in the game, so I'd wager a guess that you potentially can fight through every boss in the game. I assume this culminates in the 31st wave because the top 3 in the global leaderboard all made it to the 31st wave, so it seems like that's probably the end. And Boss Rush is basically just you fighting every boss in the game, in a row, with 1 life. It's brutal, and I hate it. Now that you understand the game, let's start with my feelings on the game, starting with the pros. And I'm not talking about myself. I'm not going to keep that in. As I've mentioned, I really enjoyed my time with this game. It was a lot of fun. I was able to sit back for an evening, relax, and just mindlessly shoot robots. The game is hard, like pretty friggin' hard, and I occasionally got frustrated, but then when I was able to demolish my enemies under my feet after countless tries and practice, it left me with a great feeling of accomplishment that I just haven't felt in a long time when playing a game. I really enjoyed the different characters you could play as, each with 2 unique weapons and their own unique personalities and in-game voiceover. Now, I played exclusively solo, so some of these characters were really bad for that, but I can see how they could be quite powerful and fun with 1 to 3 friends fighting alongside you. One character that really jumped out to me as unique was an android named Aubergine. Her main weapon is not a gun, but instead you control your little flying pet robot around. He goes to where you're pointing and attacks enemies with its spinning ears. Her secondary ability is a black hole you shoot, and it pulls all enemies to it. The black hole does no damage, but it does group the enemies all together so that your pet can rack up the damage. I started getting the hang of her a little bit, but she's extremely difficult to use by yourself. In fact, I'd say it's probably close to impossible to beat some of the bosses in the campaign mode with her solo. But as part of a team, she's most likely quite powerful, as her robot pet does a lot of damage, and her black hole ability would make for some really fun combos with your friends. And of course, Starch is the best. Another thing I really loved about Assault Android Cactus was the level design. I never found that I was just in the same place fighting a new wave of enemies, but instead I was in a completely new and interesting setting. Many areas have their own interesting mechanics, which makes for even more hectic gameplay when not only are you trying to fight a horde of enemies, but you're also trying to survive the map mechanics. There was one map where you're on a moving platform fighting enemies as normal, but every so often your platform passes by a laser which will instantly knock you down if it hits you. There are giant crates that you can hide behind, but as the level goes on, giant robots break out of them, destroying them. This slowly removes the amount of places you can run and hide to, while simultaneously fighting hordes of enemies. This was awesome. It was hard, but I really enjoyed it. I really believe without the interesting maps and mechanics, this game would not be nearly as fun as it is. It makes every mission feel fresh, even though in reality you're still just shooting hordes of enemies. Also, the combination of your health bar and battery bar made for really interesting mechanics. I found myself at the beginning focusing on dodging damage first, trying to get damage in when I could second. If I had the option, I would take the slow approach, making sure not to get hurt and slowly whittling down my opponents. But this game does not give you that option. And this really added to the hectic style of this game and makes everything quite challenging. There's no way to just camp in a corner or stand in a bottleneck because you have to constantly be racing for batteries. And because you don't know which enemy carries a battery, you have to take down as many robots as you can, as fast as you can. Which means you're often running around for power-ups and to do the most damage you can with your specials. And even when you die, the game gives you the reward of some sweet, sweet auto-tune.
I'm just a little android, and my battery's running.
I'm just a little android. Oh, sorry. Now we're going to be moving on to the cons. As I've already mentioned a little bit, there's a lot of voice acting at the very beginning, but then you don't hear any more for the rest of the game, until the very end. The only voice acting you really hear until then is random things characters say, like when they're out of battery power or when they pick up powers. And to me, that's annoying. Speaking of power-ups, there's only 3. There's a speed boost, which also seems to increase the magnetism of battery packs to you, but as I'll bring out in a couple minutes, it doesn't help. To put it bluntly, I only ever pick up this power-up by accident. It sorta sucks. The second power-up brings 2 turret dudes beside you and they attack in the direction you attack in, and this is arguably the best power-up for almost every situation. And this is because dealing damage is so important in Assault Android Cactus. You need to kill robots to finish the level, you need to kill robots to get battery packs so you can get battery packs so that you don't die, and you don't know which one has the battery pack, so you're just killing everything, and so damage is king in this game. The third power-up powers down every enemy on the map for a couple seconds. This one definitely had its uses, specifically for if I needed a battery pack soon, as I could go grab one without getting hurt. Or I could easily dispatch enemies to find the battery pack without taking damage. But that's it. After the first boss was defeated, I was already bored with the power-ups, and as one sucks and one is situational, I would often try and make sure I got the attack power-up. For an arcade game like this, power-ups are half the fun, and I was really disappointed with the complete lack of selection in Assault Android Cactus. For my last con, it's more of an overall gripe with how getting batteries works. You have to go pick them up, and they drop from random enemies, which means if you're running out of power, the only way to get a battery pack if one is not on the ground is to destroy random robots really fast and hope one of them has a pack. And if one of them does have a pack, then you have to get to that battery pack without losing enough health to get knocked down, because if you get knocked down and you're running out of battery power, you're probably going to die. So suffice to say, this leads to a lot of frustrating deaths. Another annoyance is the fact that batteries sometimes move towards you, with the big emphasis on the sometimes. And when they do, they tend to be harder to pick up than if they just sat there and waited for you. When you have the speed power up, which I assume is supposed to help you get the batteries as they fly towards you really fast, you actually just end up doing a little ring around the rosy dance with it because it can't catch you and you can't catch it. Pretty much the only way to grab it in that situation is to stand completely still, which will often lead to you getting knocked down or at least taking a bunch of damage. And this also leads to a lot of frustrating deaths, especially at boss fights, as boss fights can be quite long. And the problem with the boss fight's length is that if you die at any point, you start right back in the first phase, beginning of the first phase. So dying on the last phase of a boss with a battery flying after you and sitting basically on top of your dead corpse of a character is a really frustrating experience. And it happens a lot. You want to know what else makes for a frustrating boss fight? Beating a boss phase, him dropping a battery, you going to pick up the battery because you're almost dead, and the boss instantly starting his next phase right on top of the battery, knocking you down and dooming you to run out of power. I don't know why they have it like this, but it's really annoying. And some bosses actually do have a little break in between and they go off to another place on the map. But the hard ones, oh no, they just stand there on the battery, and so if you're almost out of charge when you beat that boss phase, well, guess what? You're probably still gonna game over. Let's move on to my final thoughts. Assault Android Cactus is a great arcade shooter experience. With fun and unique characters, maps, and mechanics, this insane, hectic game will give solo players a fun experience for a day or two, and is a great party game for when you have a bunch of people over and just want to play something fun. Despite the lack of power-ups and some annoyances that come with the battery mechanic, the diversity when it comes to character loadouts, maps, and enemy types makes this game an outstanding arcade shooter. I give Assault Android Cactus 3 stars. If this is the sort of game that interests you, I would definitely recommend picking it up for a couple hours of fun. This has been Patrick from the Gameverse. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon. Goodbye.